Hello, everyone. Again, this is Linda Taylor from CASAS. I'm the Director of Test Development at CASAS, and I'm so glad you all could find the time today to join this session. This is a monthly webinar that CASAS has been doing since the beginning of the year, and hopefully you can see the PowerPoint, which is being shared. And just to assure you that we are recording the session, and so you will be able to see the PowerPoint along with the recording, and we will also post the PowerPoint as a PDF just alone without the audio if you'd like to see it that way as well. So please do, if you have any questions, post them in the chat box, and we'll be checking periodically to see if we can answer questions along the way. Our focus today, we're going to do a very short CASAS overview. I don't know if any of you are new to CASAS, but just in case, a couple things about it. Then we're going to talk briefly about which CASAS tests are approved by the National Reporting System, the U.S. Department of Ed OCTAE's office. And then we will get into actually first covering the math goals test, which was just recently approved on March 7th. And we haven't focused on it really in one of these webinars yet. So that we'll start there and then talk about the reading goals tests, and then a few other things at the end, time permitting. So just a few things about CASAS. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been around for a long time. We consider ourselves to be a national leader in adult basic ed and adult secondary as well, and adult EFL. We have tests that are approved by the U.S. Department of Ed, as I mentioned. We're used pretty much all over the country, but substantially in 35 states and also internationally. We do have something called a national consortium where we get input from state directors and trainers from all over the country. They help us figure out what the priorities are for the efforts. We, of course, have technical manuals available on request. This slide shows an overview of the CASAS system on the left, where there are 4 aspects, curriculum, assessment, and instruction. And so we feel it's very important to integrate these 3 areas especially. And then, of course, we're all bound by our accountability requirements, so that's become the 4th aspect. To do this, we have CASAS competencies, which are, you see it on the right, these are all on our website. And these are functional life skills competencies that relate to various language skills. Then we have basic skills content standards, and the ones that relate to our NRS-approved assessments are in reading, listening, and math. So these are the 3 areas that we have approved assessments in. They're standardized tests that are multiple choice. One of the things that we're very excited about is, of course, now our tests are computer delivered, and we encourage you to explore that if you have not already. It's really makes it a little bit easier and a little more precise in terms of assessment when you use the e-tests. However, we also have paper, because we know some of you have sites or locations where you cannot use the internet if it's not reliable. But I think that's hopefully changing over the next few years, and because I think you'll find that the e-test is very convenient and efficient. One thing I want to make sure that you know on this webinar is that we have delivery in Chromebooks and iPads, as well as, of course, computers and laptops. But these 2 new means of delivering the test open out a lot of possibilities for testing in different locations than a computer lab itself, and they're cheaper options in many cases. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. All our tests are available in these delivery modes, and all of our tests too are available on touch screens, which can be very good for lower level learners or those who are not familiar with computers. We have something called Quick Search Online, which is a free online database through our website that relates the instructional materials that are all out there by all the publishers to our tests and to the competencies and content standards. And in addition, the e-test is the user interface of our software, but the back end is called TOPS Pro Enterprise, and that is what automatically scores the tests, produces many, many kinds of reports at the student, class, and agency level. We won't have time to get into that in depth today, but I do encourage you to explore that. Just a few more things about CASAS in general. A few of the benefits of e-tests, and as far as the paper, our booklets are reusable. The training is now free, and that is something that hopefully will facilitate your ability to get started. We do have very good support by real human beings through our tech support for e-tests, as well as any other kinds of questions about the assessment that you may have. So we encourage you, if you do have questions, please email or call us. And there are sample test items on the website for all the different tests, which will help you to become familiar with the items at the different levels, and that can be shared, of course, with students to prepare them for the kinds of things they'll encounter in the test. Now, let's look at which of our tests are approved and for which programs. So this slide shows the ones that are approved for ABE and ASE. And now, starting in July, the two series that you'll be using are for reading, the Reading Goals series. It's 900 series, and that has a 7-year approval through 2025. And the newly approved Math Goals, which is for ABE and approved for 3 years through 2022. So for ABE programs, these are the two tests to be used starting in the new program year. The Reading Goals you could be using now, and the Math Goals too, for that matter, but we imagine most programs will be starting in July. Then for ESL, it's a different story. Those tests are on a different trajectory, and they are approved through February of 2021, with the assumption, as has always happened, that that will be extended till June of 2021. And this is the CASAS tests are in the same time frame as all of the other ESL tests that are NRS approved right now. So for reading, we have 3 different possibilities. The Life and Work Reading in the 80 series covers all levels, beginning to advanced, up to high school level. Well, advanced ESL, I should say. And the very low literacy is called Beginning Literacy, and there are 2 alternate forms of that, 27, 28. And then we do have, some of you may not be aware that we have another approved set of alternate forms, the 513 and 514, in our secondary series that are called Reading for Language Arts. So during these next couple years, if you would like to have a more academic assessment than you see in the Life and Work Reading, you could try out the Reading for Language Arts. And if you're on e-tests, any approved CASAS test, I should say all approved CASAS tests are available in e-tests. So that is also an advantage of using the e-test because you don't have to buy a new series per se. You can just simply use your test units for any test that's available there. So you could take a look at it if you like and try it out if you want. The other approved test for ESL is Life and Work Listening. It's the 980 series. Okay. All right, now just to summarize where we are with all of the new tests in our new goals series, and it is a little complicated, sorry for that, but there's nothing we could do about it. The reading goals for ABE and ASE is, as I just mentioned, approved through 2025, and the math goals, also for ABE and ASE, is approved through 2022. Okay, that's simple. But and for ESL, the reading goals is not yet approved, but it was submitted last October, and it is pending approval. We don't expect to hear until late spring, early summer at the earliest, and sometimes there's a bit of back and forth. with the test reviewers, so we really can't say exactly when we expect that to happen, but we will let you know as soon as we hear. I should say that we submitted the exact same test, reading goals assessment, that we already got approved for ABE and ASE. So that same test, but with different studies supporting it with ESL students, was submitted, and that's what we were waiting to hear on. CASAS has always had the same reading test for ABE and ASE. But now, with the new one approved for, the reading goals approved for ABE, that test is the only one that can be used currently for ABE. All right, then our listening goals, we plan to submit this coming October, and then would hear back hopefully sometime in 2020. So all of these new goal series assessments are aligned with the College and Career Readiness Standards for adult education, as well as far as the ESL ones are concerned, with the English Language Proficiency Standards. Okay, do we have any questions? All right. Okay, we do have a question, which I'll just quickly answer, is that we are just about to publish those student performance by competency and student performance by content standard sheets. I'm sorry for the delay in that, but that is something that we will be producing very soon, and we'll make it available to you. All right. Now I'm going to get into test timing. In general, just to summarize before getting into the details, if you're going to test in two modalities, that is, could be reading and math, or for ABE, or if it's ESL reading and listening, in general, it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to do that. Now, I know some of you may only test in one modality, let's say only reading, but if you are testing in two, that's how long it would take. And let me go into the details. So if you're using eTests, there's a short locator, and there's one for each modality. So there's a reading one, there's a different math one, there's a different listening one. They are at the most 15 minutes. They can, students can take less time to finish those. They're short. If you're using paper testing, then there's an appraisal that's longer, and that takes 30 minutes. So there are other things to be done as far as intake screening, but just in general, these are the two tools. And the short locator, there's no charge for. It's included with the eTest, so we really strongly encourage you to use that in order to have an accurate pretest for the student's baseline scale score. Same for the appraisal. And it does take a bit longer to use it, but rather than just using some pretest that you think might be appropriate, it's always better to use the appraisal. Then, so what these locator or appraisals do is that they determine the appropriate pretest form. And as far as timing goes, for the new reading goals for ABE and ASE, the level A is, as before, 60 minutes maximum, but the other levels, B, C, and D, are a little longer than our previous series. We had to extend the time, allowable time, to 75 minutes. And this was really expected because these tests are more rigorous, and so in order to do that, we had to extend it an extra 15 minutes. That means that if a student, of course, takes less time, that's perfectly fine. But in order to be fair and based on our field testing research, 75 minutes will allow approximately 90% of the students to finish, and that's a way of being equitable. So I'm going to show you shortly some ways that we were able to keep the time to only 75 minutes and not longer, but yet still cover the rigorous content that is required to align to the College and Career Readiness Standards. Same thing for the math, though the leveling is a little bit different. But for the lower level, which is a combined level AB, it's 60 minutes maximum. And then for the level CD, it's 75 minutes. Now, between now and July, the life skills math or the secondary math series can still be used. Those, all of these next ones are only 60 minutes as they have been. And so for ESL, there's no change. You'll be continuing, as I was mentioning earlier, you'll keep using the Life and Work Reading and the Life and Work Listening series for ESL until 2021, and they continue to be 60 minutes for the reading, and the listening is actually a little bit less, between 40 and 50 minutes. Then, sorry, nothing has changed as far as the interval between pre and post testing for the new series, 70 to 100 hours and not less than 40. Okay, are there any questions? Like no additional questions. Let me go ahead. We are in the process of conducting studies with the GED and HiSET, and we did this before with the GED, but we have a cooperative arrangement with them. What we need to do in order to give you an idea of whether, at what CASAS scale score a student is likely to be able to pass these high school equivalency HSE tests, we need to include, we need your help to include students and report the scores to us, students who are just about to take either the GED or the HiSET in reading or math or both, and who have just taken a CASAS test or could take it right after that. And then when we alert the GED or the HiSET of this, they will tell us about the scores of those students. So we do have an incentive for students that participate and for the programs, and really would encourage you to help with this. We're getting close to the finish line and really need your help. And it actually is a nice way, if you'd like to try out our new reading goals or math goals tests with your students that are at that HSE prep level. This is a great way to do it because they'll actually get a gift card from Target, and you'll be able to see how well they do compared to in relation to whether they pass these HSE tests. So please, if you're interested, email fieldtesting@casas.org, call us any old way. We would love to include you in these studies so we can finish them and get them into our reports. All right, now I'm going to go into the math goal series. As I just mentioned, but just to be clear, there are 2 levels of math goals, not 4. So the combined AB level has 40 items on each form, and this combined CD has 38. Something very different about this series for us is that the calculators are provided online. I'm going to show you in a minute what that looks like in the online version, the e-test. But if you're doing the paper delivery, you will need to provide basic calculators, and we have specifications for what kinds of calculators are acceptable on our website. There are FAQs for the math goals and the reading goals, and so these types of specific questions are answered there, and so I encourage you to go to the website and see. There are a range of item types, situational scenarios. We're still very committed to reflecting real-world applications so that it's not, it's still academic content in terms of the math that's being assessed, but always applied in real-world applications. There are word problems where we try to keep the complexity of the text and the cognitive load consistent with the level of the test. There is calculation required at from beginning to advanced, and as well as some traditional academic context. Another important thing to understand about the series is the formulae are provided so that it's not necessary to memorize them, and if they're needed, they're provided so that they can be used and applied to the problem that's presented. We have a question about whether the calculator is the same as required by GED. I'm sorry, I do not know that for sure. we will get, if you look, and maybe Adriana, while we're on here, if you could take a look on the math goals FAQs and see if there's an answer to that, and then we could get back to you right away. If not, I'm sure it's in the FAQs, but I don't have it in front of me right now. But let's carry on. So the content of the math goal series is, again, as I mentioned, we do still address functional life skills context, and those come from our CASAS competencies. And because of WIOA, there are quite a few that relate to employment settings. But in contrast to our previous series, I would say the focus is on the standards, and particularly the CCR standards for adult education. And these are 5 areas that we address. We also, you may not be aware of these, but the NRS does publish educational functioning level descriptors for reading and math, and those are also essentially aligned to the college and career readiness standards. So when we do our studies, we are very much keeping in mind these NRS descriptors and aligning to those as far as what the difficulty at each level should be. So these are some other sort of guidelines for how we have approached the math and focusing on the CCR standards. So they do demand a deeper understanding of mathematical foundations, concepts, and various things. So this is also the approach that we took. We try to build the difficulty and to progressing from the lower to the higher levels. Again, rigorous application of this conceptual understanding tied to real-world concepts. They have these procedural skills as well in the CCR standards that we incorporated. So it's not just coming up with the answer, but asking questions that will indicate whether the test taker knows how to get the answer and can explain it in some cases. So it's not just finding the answer, but seeing the bigger picture, understanding the meaning of the answers, and applying concepts. So there's a little bit of a not exactly a one-to-one relationship between our CASAS math standards and the CCR standards. So here you can see how there are slightly different names to them and different, especially measurement, the last two in the CCR are combined, but in our CASAS standards, we've separated out measurement from statistics, data analysis, and probability. And then there's a few other areas in the CCR that include measurement from the CASAS category. So it's actually, if you've worked with the CCR standards, it's a little bit challenging to understand exactly how they play out. And we found that our CASAS standards are a little bit more straightforward. But so we have retained them, and in our reports, we'll be reporting out in terms of both the CASAS math content areas as well as the CCR standards. So if you are using the CCR standards, we will be having reports that report the results in terms of those, or if you prefer ours, you can use those. So that's there for you to use what you prefer. So in these NRS descriptors, there are examples of the most critical concepts and skills, but it's not a complete or comprehensive delineation of all the skills, so that some of the things that we're testing are not explicitly mentioned in the NRS descriptors, but they are also describing what a student needs to be able to do to exit a level, and these are the areas that we mentioned earlier. Now here's a chart that shows how the really the design of the level A, B, and CD forms in terms of the NRS levels for ABE. So one thing that's very important to understand about the NRS EFLs, that's the levels for mathematics, is that they are different from the NRS levels for reading. And the way they are different is in terms of, in particular, this fourth level, where there's something called middle intermediate, which does not exist in the NRS levels for reading. So there are 3 intermediate levels in math and only 1 adult secondary level in math. So that's accordingly how we have designed the test, that and the level AB forms allow you to document entry and completion of or exit from levels 1, 2, and 3, and entry into the level 4 middle intermediate, but not completion of it. And that's where there's overlap into the CD forms, where you can enter and complete level 4, 5, and entry into 6. The NRS descriptors do not require an exit from 6. That is normally done through the high school equivalency test. All right, I see there's a lot of talk about the calculator, and we will, I'm not sure where we landed with that, but we are sending out this presentation, and we'll also, well, we're not sending it out, we're posting it to the website. All right, let's keep going. Now, this also shows you what I was just explaining briefly, is that this is the, for math, these are the, on the left side are the old levels, which are still actually the levels for reading, but they were the levels for math, but now you can see that the middle intermediate level provides an additional lower level in math. And you can see that the score ranges do differ considerably at the beginning literacy level, where to complete the first level, and this is aligned with the language of the descriptors and therefore what's assessed, that it's 193 and below to complete beginning literacy rather than 200 and below, and then 194 to 203 for beginning basic. So at low intermediate, the overlap starts to happen more between what was before, but you can get in with to that level with the 204 and out of it with a 214. Middle intermediate goes 215 to 225, so that's starting to take up the difference that compared to the previous score ranges, so that when you get to high intermediate, it actually starts higher at 226, but it ends at the same place as before, at 235. And one nice thing I'm sure you'll all appreciate is that instead of this very large score range at level 4, 15 points in the previous series, the standard setting, we have to convene a fairly large panel of experienced adult math practitioners, adult ed math practitioners, to do what's called a standard setting study, where they determine the cut scores, these cut scores, based on their review of a continuum of items placed in a kind of a booklet. We do it virtually though, but from low to high. And using the NRS descriptors, they determine where they think these cut points should be. And so it's sort of interesting, I think, that the high intermediate finished in the same place, but because of this new middle intermediate level, as I mentioned, the beginning literacy goes lower, and these ranges are quite different in leading up to high intermediate. So this is something I'm sure you're going to want to study and get your heads around, which is different from before. Then adult secondary, as I mentioned, is combined. There's no more low and high. There's only one adult secondary level, which is similar to before, 236 and above. All right. This is a summary of how the CCR math standards are covered in terms of the CASAS content domains, the 5 domains, on the 2 different levels, AB and CD. So number sense, 28% of the AB test is addressing number sense, while only 15%, and that's to be expected. At the higher level, you have less focus on number sense. Then algebra, it flips, and that's also to be expected. There's higher coverage in the CD level of algebra. Geometry is about the same in both. So is measurement, and also statistics and probability similar. All right. We're going to look at that in a minute in more depth by level. Now here, as I told you, this is what the e-test screen looks like. And as always, it has the prompt on the left and then the question and the answer options on the right. The icon here is the calculator on the far right. And when you click on it, you get this. The calculator opens. It can be moved around the screen, and here's what it looks like. It has only the basic functions. So those of you who are asking about it, this hopefully will help you understand what we mean by a basic calculator. I'm going to go back and, well, actually, I can show you here. One of the new features, too, of the goals series is that, excuse me, if a display, that is let's say it's a diagram or some kind of a figure, relates to more than one item, there you'll see this where it says 1 of 2, and that means that this is the first of a set of 2 items. And if you were to click on this arrow, you would get to 2 of 2. There's still elsewhere on the screen in the top left, I believe it is, an indication of which number you are on in the test as a whole. So that might be, 23 out of 40. But this is telling you how many items you are in this particular set, which one of those you're on. And the reason for that is we wanted to give an idea that some of these do have more than one item in a set, and that was one of the ways that we were able to decrease the time required for the test and the efficiency. And as always, there's a review. When you get to the end, you can go back and review, and there are practice items also. All right, so now if we want to look at some of the sample items, this is the number sense, and here are a few examples. This is at the AB level, so it's a word problem, but very simple number sense calculation, really. And then at the CD level, with formulas, with the instruction, the word problem relating to a construction project, how many nails, and it's not asking the answer, it's asking how can the cost be calculated, right? So which formula is appropriate? That's aligned with the CCR asking about how rather than just what's the answer. In algebra, these are the summaries of these CCR standards. I'm not going to read through them, but you can at your leisure look at those if you're not familiar. Then here are a couple of examples at the AB level. So using the equation 24x equals 120, what is the answer? And then at the higher level, plotting a line, the equation is given, the slope, etc. Okay. These are on the website. They're in the PowerPoint, but they're also on the website as sample items, so you'll be able to study them and see them at your, when you can. All right, geometry. Here we have the AB. So this is, do you know how to describe these lines? What are the mathematical terms to appropriately describe them? And at the higher level, about angles. Then in measurement, and here's an AB question, understanding about feet and inches. And here's a more complex measurement item that has a complex figure where you need to be able to calculate the approximate area of Jeremy's patio. The formula is provided at the bottom. Then in statistics and probability, here's about lunch cart orders on a weekly basis. So you need to be able to read those bar graphs. And then a probability question. So I'll leave you to do that on your own. You're not going to do that in the next 10 seconds, but you can take a look. All right. So let me just check. There's a question. When will the math goals blueprint be added to the website? Yes, we are preparing that, and it will be up there soon. I'm sorry it's not there yet, but we're working on that. All right. So any other questions before we get into math? We go away from the math goals. We have a new math goals page on the website, and it has the grade level equivalents. And if you do need them, we of course encourage you to use scale scores. But if you need grade level equivalents for any of your partners or for CTE or training of any kind, they're there to use. There are, as I said, FAQs and sample items there, and these PowerPoints. Yes, students can use a basic calculator, correct. And as I was showing you, the calculator is provided on the screen. I'm not going to go back there now, but or if you are doing paper delivery, you need to provide a basic calculator. Any other questions about the math? Okay, I will go on to the reading. I'm going to cover it more quickly than the math. There are other, the previous 2 monthly webinars, and the last one is posted on the reading goals page of the website, goes into more depth on the reading goals. So I encourage you to go listen to that if you want more in depth, or if you just want this somewhat shorter version. Here we go. So what this slide shows is a comparison between the Life and Work reading scale score ranges, that is the old ones, and the new reading goals score ranges for ABE. And as you can see, these are the same levels as before. That hasn't changed for reading, but the score ranges have changed. And again, that's to be expected because of the greater rigor and the different descriptors, quite different than before. So there's a slight difference in the beginning ABE literacy, 203 and below. So in order to get out of beginning ABE literacy, you need a 204 as opposed to a 210. Sorry, a 201. So as you transition, you may find that some students who you might have thought were ready to get out of beginning ABE literacy might have to stay there a bit longer in order to transition into beginning basic ed because of this difference between 201 and 204. Then what's interesting about these score ranges is that it's this level 2 that is the widest range. Remember, it used to be level 4, but now that has changed. So now it's level 2 that's a very wide range. It used to be 10 points. Now it's more. So that may take a little longer to get through. And so this is where we see quite a big difference. that in order to get into low intermediate basic ed, it now requires a 217. It's the same CASAS scale, but it's a 217 as compared to a 211, which is quite significant. So again, it's an 11-point range, about the same, but much higher entry and exit points for low intermediate. Then high intermediate, again, starts much higher. And because this used to be the level that was much wider, it only ends a little bit higher than before. So, but still, to get into NRS level 5 for ABE or ASE at this point, instead of a 236, you need a 239, and you need a 249 to get into level 6, or out of 5. So this has changed slightly. So you can see there are differences. Again, we had a similar, with different people, but we had a similar cut score study for this reading test, and these were the results. Questions? All right. So like the math goals, we have CASAS competencies as the context, but we focus really on the content standards, and that's the CCR standards. We still have our task areas, that is the format of the reading passage, and those come out in the reports. And then there's a focus on depth of knowledge so that there is enough of the higher order thinking skills incorporated. So this is a summary. This is a test blueprint for the Reading Goals series. And one thing that's quite different, we did not have any vocabulary-focused items per se in our previous tests. So about 20 to 25% of the test is vocabulary. That relates to R4 in the CCR reading. And then the two reading comprehension categories are distinguished by the level of depth of knowledge, really. So in the reading comprehension skills, these sub-score areas relate to a DOK1, a depth of knowledge of just answering, responding to detail or recall, not higher order cognitive level required. While the higher order reading skills require DOK2 or 3, and you can see are more complex, inferring, drawing conclusions, these kinds of other topics that require higher order skills. And you can see the related CCR standards for these, and the other ones that we felt were covered kind of across the different categories. I see there's a question about the calculators. Well, all right, I will, let me just mention about the, I'm sorry to go off topic with the reading, but I'll just address this question, that the calculators are available the whole time, whether you're on the e-test or on the paper. So that icon is always there. You don't always need it, but it's there if you need it. So that's how it is comparable to the paper. So you should be giving them the calculator to use if you're giving paper tests throughout the test, and the same thing is available too in the online context. All right, so back to the blueprint. I don't see any questions. Let me carry on. This is summarizing the DOK levels. We're not able in a multiple choice test easily to address DOK4. So we really have only been able to manage DOK2 and 3, which is actually significant and should be sufficient to as far as that level of DOK3. And as far as the vocabulary, we use what's called the academic word list. So if you want to Google it, you'll find it, and that's how it's still 570 words, but that is what we drew from for the targeted vocabulary questions on this test. For the reading, in order to keep the time down to 75 minutes maximum, what we did was well, first of all, we have some features that are new for this series. Sentence completion we didn't have before, where there's a beginning of the sentence and they complete it. We have numbered lines, we have underlined words, but item families is the way that we had them before, where there's more than one item related to a reading passage. But in the new Reading Goals series, we did more of that, and to the extent that at the level C and D, you'll see that there are some sets of items that have a reading passage with up to 5 items related to them. Also, we tried to keep the reading passages to be as short as possible. We had to have some of them be a little longer in order to get the complexity and test what we needed to test. But in general, we were able to keep the time down to 75 minutes by having more items related to one reading passage. We do have sample items on our test site for all of our series. They're free, they're available, even on the audio files are available for listening. So please do take advantage of them to familiarize your students so they can reduce their test anxiety and have some practice in the kinds of items that they're going to see on the test. And also you can use these items to share with your administration, with teachers, and all. These are just a few sample items for the reading. I'm showing you some more difficult ones because these are really wanted to demonstrate how they are really at that higher level of cognitive thinking required, and they're short but yet complex. So this one is only 9 lines, but the text is complex. The question is actually complex and is getting at a higher order skill with asking about how the writer distinguishes between buying and leasing. Then, and again, this is a topic of interest to our students. It's not overly abstract or academic, but but the question being asked is an academic question asking about the writer's craft. Then on this same passage is a question, what statement would make the best conclusion? So again, that's how would you end the article. It kind of requires you to understand how to summarize it and how to best flow into the conclusion. And then this one is a level C item, and it's showing you how the vocabulary has the underlined word in the passage and as well in the question. And these options are taken from that academic word list. We have revised the CASAS reading standards and drastically reduced them and reorganized them. There is a version currently on the CASAS website. We are in the next few weeks about to post a second edition of these with a few minor changes to the standards. And so you're welcome, though, to take a look at the current one because you can get an idea definitely of the kinds of changes that we made, and it has the dots for ABE, but now the new one will also have the dots showing the level of each standard, what levels it should address, as well for ESL. So you can, these are the categories, which the bold ones are the same as the Reading Goals Blueprint categories, and this also aligns in terms of the DOK in each of these categories. So there's also the foundational literacy at the beginning and literary if you want to use it at the end. All right, and there's back to calculators. There's more on the calculator in the chat box, which you can take a look at. All right, field testing. I already mentioned the second one about the HSE test, but we are also studies with ESL students to support the listening goal submission. So we would love to have you participate in that. We have a relatively short time frame in order to get that submitted in October, beginning of October. So please contact us if you'd like to see the new series by field testing it. And we do have incentives for students who participate and to the program for helping. Our Summer Institute, if you can make it, is in Orange County at Hyatt Regency from June 11 to 13. So there are workshops and a lot of chance to network with other adult educators from around the country. There is in this PowerPoint, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just want to let you know that there is quite a lot of information about e-tests. It's being used all over the country, and talks about the advantages of the computer-delivered testing, how accommodations are done. There are two levels. There's basic online implementation, and these bullets explain what it is that you get with the basic level. So that is possible if you want to just get started with this, but if you want to have more power to look at class level reports as opposed to just individual reports, which you get the basic, but excuse me, the enhanced version costs a little bit more, but you do get class level reports. You can do a lot more with data and instructional hours. You can take attendance in it. You get a lot more ability to look, to drill down and see, for example, which students have not been post-tested, which can be extremely important so that you can have a good pre- and post-test match for your state accountability. So in a nutshell, that's what those two levels, basic and enhanced. And if you're thinking to start with e-tests, there's some required modules that are all free on our website that you need to complete. And there's a going live checklist that takes you through the steps in order to get to the point where you can purchase the test administrations. They're called WTUs, Web Test Units. And then as you go, at any point, you're absolutely welcome to call our tech support staff, who will stay on the phone with you for as long as you need to get you through it. So here are a few reports. This comes at the end of the test, this very simple personal score report that tells what the scale score was essentially and what it means. Then we have the individual skills profile that comes with the basic level of WTUs that summarizes, well, it tells the scale scores for all the two, in this case, 2 tests that were taken, and then in the area of the competencies and the content standards and the tasks for both reading and listening in the major categories, subcategories. Then you can have, also with the basic, you get a student level performance by competency report. And if you want the enhanced version, you'll get the class level, which will tell you the percentage of students in the class that got an item right or wrong. Then this shows you the one of the things that you get with, this is how you can record instructional hours, sorry. And this, you also get a running list of the students' tests that were taken. And you can also see the next assigned test, which is actually embedded in the e-test so that it, and Top Pro Enterprise TE, so that it will automatically put students in the next appropriate assigned test. But in the software, you can see which, there's this report that can be generated with the basic implementation. And if you're scanning into Top Pro Enterprise using paper and scanning, you can generate this test so you can see which, you can generate this report, sorry, which can tell you which the next assigned test should be. Then this is an example of some of the kinds of things you can export with the enhanced version, whether at the class level, the site level, the agency level. And this is the data integrity, where it can dig down and tell you which, for example, in this case, which students are missing a post-test. Just about 5 minutes left. Are there, let's see if there's any other questions. Seems like not. We have this workforce skills certification system. We call it WSCS. And this is a way to give students a profile of, that summarizes their basic skills, whichever tests they took. So if they took reading and math, as in this example, it shows that on the profile. And then we have a partnership with an assessment of soft skills. It's a video test, and it includes simulations, multiple choice, and it reports out soft skills. So this is a way that students can provide a little more information to a prospective employer about what they can do, not just with their basic skills, but in addition with some of their soft skills. Then our National External Diploma Program, it's growing, and if you are not familiar with it, please contact us. It's an alternative to the HSE test, where it's competency-based, and you do get a high school diploma that's awarded at the local or the state level, depending on your state. So if you're interested, contact us. We'd be glad to tell you more about it. Our CASAS website is chock full of helpful and interesting information, so please do use it. I'll just tell you, if you go to product overviews, I think I have a minute, maybe I can just go there. Here's our tech support information, and I think I showed you earlier, so option 2. But let me just very quickly go to the CASAS website, and this is, actually I'm going to go home and show you how to get there. Here's our homepage, and hopefully you're able to see this. Is this sharing right now? Should be, okay. Sorry. Okay, yes, sharing, okay. So now if you go to product overviews up in the top left corner, under the CASAS logo, product overviews. By the way, here's the CASAS catalog right here up top. You go to assessments, here in the bottom left, you'll see there's the reading goals and math goals. So this is the new math goals page. It has an overview with sample test items. There's also a separate PDF with sample items. There's a flyer that shows some sample items and little information. There's the FAQs we've been referring to, and also the grade level equivalents. So all that is there, as well as a chart that shows the form numbers and number of items and how long. Then we have the same thing for reading goals. And as I mentioned, there's a webinar recording that goes into more detail on the reading goals. Also, there's a test blueprint there, FAQs, as well as our grade level equivalents. And the sample items, you click here to get to them. There's levels A, B, C, and D, a good number of items at each level, and a chart showing the form numbers and the timing and the number of items. And just to quickly show you the blueprint is something that I think gives a nice snapshot of the coverage of the college and career readiness standards at each level. So this is our level A that doesn't have any higher order skills, but what happens is that you can see the slowly increasing at level B, a little bit of higher order skills. The vocabulary is still there. At level C, oops, there we go. C, it's in equal proportion, the basic reading comprehension and the higher order. And at level D, it really jumps up, where there's 50% of the test is the higher order reading skills. So you can look at this in more detail, and you can see how, for example, only at the higher level, there's only academic vocabulary and meaning from context, which is R4, C and D, and which with the descriptors. So please take a look at that test blueprint and anything else on the website that's helpful. All right, we have reached the top of the hour. So I hope we've answered your questions. We will be posting this very soon to the website. We will, if the information that you're asking about the calculators is not in our FAQs, we will update the FAQs based on your questions to make sure that we can address them because I'm sure others will have similar questions. So we're going to be constantly updating the FAQs both for the math goals and the reading goals. So please check in periodically to see if anything has been added. Well, thank you so much for attending, and you can contact us. I'll put back my, there's our phone number, and also at the very beginning, there we go, is my information. If you'd like to reach out, please do. Thanks so much for attending.